So what are the different questions that can be asked in an interview setting related to use state? So if we are discussing about the hooks, the first is the use state hook, right? So what are the different questions that can be asked? So let's to the coding. Let's understand that. So first of all, use state is for like kind of the state of the component level state is maintained through use state. Obviously, you can use reference also for having the same, but it's a different use case use reference. But uh, talking about use state, for the when the component will be re-rendered again, the value that is there in that particular state variable will be retained, and that's the primary benefit of use state. So let's write some code, and then through that we can discuss. Okay, now before using use state, what we can do is, so let's create a simple button, and I'll show you through the example. So let me create a button. Okay. um, and maybe I'll create a counter kind of a function. So I'll write here handle counter handle or handle click. Okay. And I'll create this function over here, const handle click equals to, now this is the handle click, right? Now if I'm having a, so without using state variable, if you want to do something like I'll have a variable called counter. I'll have it as initially 0, and when I'm clicking, I'll just do a counter plus plus, right? This is the normal behavior, right? So it is end is expected that whenever maybe I'll just create a div. In the div I have to show the counter like this, right? This is the correct behavior, right? Now when I save over here, let it get compiled. So what is expected is that if I click on the increment counter, like, okay, let me give some style also. It's not looking good. So let's give some smalls, little bit of styling to this. Okay. So I'll just give some background color as black, and color as white. As I think this should work. Okay. And maybe some padding also. Let's give some padding of 5 pixel. Okay. And radius border radius as 5 pixel. Okay, so that looks good. Okay, great. Okay, ideally you shouldn't use a style, you should use a class name, but to beautify it, I just kept it like this. Okay, now let it be like this. So expected that when I click on the counter value should increase, right? So if I just click over here, the counter value is not increasing because we have not written anything in the handle click. Okay, we've written in the handle click, the counter is not increasing. But if you just write a log, let's see in the log if the counter value is increasing after clicking, right? So let me open the log over here, and I will show you, right? So this is the log. Clear everything. I click on it. See, the value in the log is increasing, but here it is not increasing. Okay, that means counter value is increasing, but in the UI over here it is not changing. The reason being, so whenever we are clicking on this, the value in the variable over here, it is increasing, but it is not kind of retaining the value. It is not retaining the value for the next render. The other reason, it is not, although the value is changing, in the logs you can see, but over here the value is not kind of increasing. Okay, to solve this problem, we have to store that particular state. That means the previous value whatever was there, that we have to keep inside a state variable. Then only after clicking, when the a new you know when the rendering happens again, then that previous value is written and it will be shown. Okay, now to solve this problem, instead of using a counter variable in this manner, I will use a state variable. Simple. Okay. So for using a state variable, I'll use something like this counter and set counter. Why set counter is needed? Because set counter is used to increment the change the state, basically increment or decrement. So I'll give initial value as 0, and now if I I shouldn't do counter plus plus in this manner. What I have to do is that I just need to do set counter. So whenever it is clicking, don't write counter plus here, just write counter plus 1. Okay. Now if you see, when I say over here, what will happen is, let me clear the console. When I click on the increment counter, you see what is happening. This portion, you see a blue color thing is happening, right? So this is the profiling. It is saying that, okay, whenever I'm clicking over here, the set counter is, since I've written here set counter, it is incrementing the counter as well as it is reloading the page. So basically what happens is that whenever you use a state variable, well, inside a state variable, there is a variable that contains the initial value. So that means the initial value is 0 is assigned to the counter, and the set counter, I mean, not the set counter, this basically returns a function. Okay. Now this function is used to change the value, initial value, that is set initial value is 0. If I use set counter and I do counter plus 1, it is incrementing the value from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3. If I do minus 1, it will decrement. Okay. But the thing is, whenever I'm using updating the state of a state variable, this particular this particular whatever I'm returning, that will be re-rendered again. That means this particular UI will be re-rendered again. Now during re-rendering, our state should be storing the previous state, then only it will be visible. That is what the problem was earlier, right? So there are two things that is happening. One is the previous state is written, so incrementing, when it is incrementing, the new value is shown. Second is the UI is getting re-rendered. That means this particular not the JS file, I'll tell, but the UI is getting re-rendered whenever the state variable changes. Okay. Now if I just do counter -1, what will happen? So the, you see, it should decrease, right? It is decreasing, right? Which means that in the log also you see that it is changing. So now this is the basic thing that anyone can ask you. That is one thing. Then what people can ask you is, if I just do one more time here like this, what will happen? Let's do a +1. So what is the thing that will happen if I do 2 times or maybe 3 times? Okay. So initially is 0, right? So initially value is 0. If I do 3 times, you are expecting that the value should be 3. So you have to reload it sometimes. Okay. Now it is 0. So when I click on the handle click will be triggered, and the counter should be incremented to 3 times is what the expectation is. But let's see what will happen. Okay. When I click over here, you see it is happening only once. Okay, it is not happening 3 times. Even if I wrote 3 times, it is happening. Why? Because the updation of state, or when the, because here whenever I'm changing the values, it is not changing immediately. It will be changing in the next rendering phase. Okay, in the next render, when this particular code will be re-rendered again, then it will say that what is the previous state, and based on that it will increment the value and show the value. Now there is something called consolidation of state. Means if you are using more than one state variables, it's not like for every state variable change the UI will be rendered again. Whatever is the state variable change happen, not only set counter. If I can use hundreds of use state variables here, whatever the variable it's changing, it happens, the re-rendering happens only once. So consolidation of all the state variables, then the re-rendering happens. Okay. So that's the reason it is not incrementing thrice. Now, but if you want to do it immediately, like you want to do the state change immediately, then you have to do something like this. So I'll just write the previous counter, and I will use a functional approach. So in the functional approach, what happens is that I take that, okay, take the previous counter and you increment it immediately. So if I use a, basically I'm passing a function to this set counter, and this set counter, it's a callback basically. Whenever I'm updating the value, since it's a callback, it is not getting destroyed, because the concept of memoization comes again here. Or that's the reason whenever I'm rendering again, it will re-render. So now let me remove this part and let me write this thrice. Okay. Okay. Now you will see it will be incrementing 3 times. Okay. See 5 came, right? Let me refresh and then I will. So let me click here. You see 3, 6, 9, 12. So when I'm using a functional approach, if I'm using in the form of function, basically I'm passing a callback, whenever inside the callback, whenever the value is increasing, which means that set counter is calling this particular function, and it is asking for, okay, what is the previous state, and basically set counter will call this particular function. And since in this function it's a callback function, so the previous value will be retained, and the previous value will be written for these as well as for these, as well for these, so it retains the previous value. That's the reason immediately it gets updated. Okay, that's the answer why. If not only addition, if you do subtraction also, it will work the same way. Okay, now one more question people might ask is like, if I have to in kind of so if I'm setting the state in this manner, can I set this particular state in a conditional approach? That means if I write a condition and then try to set this state like something like this, if maybe true, if something is true, right? If something is true, I want to kind of set uh, a state set val like this. Okay, so will it allow? The answer is no, it won't allow, because it is saying, you see, when I hover over it, it's saying that use state is called conditionally. You can't set state variable conditionally. Okay, that's the answer. So you'll never write inside a condition. Okay. Okay, so the next question is okay, what are the other different ways to update these particular states? There is one more way of setting of state variable. So here we have set it directly. We can set in a kind of an other way is like in a functional way. Like suppose I want to kind of, I can write a callback here, and I can set the value here. Well, not that counter here, I'll just write here maybe value here, right? So if I do like this, you'll see what will happen is, okay, so what I'm telling that, okay, so initializing is, I just gave a direct value here. So I can give a number, I can give an object, I can give an array, anything I can give, that is not a problem. But I want to assign initial value to this particular variable. So this 0 here for assigning, it is assigning to the counter. Now counter is 0 initial, so initial value is 0. But I want to set the initial value in the form of a callback. Why I am doing like that? Why I am doing like that? Because there are certain use cases where that is needed, like something like kind of when you are writing a setting up the value in the form of a using local storage. Okay, so in the local storage, when you use it, you don't get value directly from the local storage, right? It's synchronous. It's obviously synchronously, but in some cases you might not need to access directly. In that case, kind of you have to write something conditionally. You have to set up the value. In that case, you will need this functional approach, because we can't set the value directly. You need some conditional, like if something is true, then get the value from the local storage, or else use the value that is already there, like that, right? So if true is there, then kind of value, so kind of return kind of okay, get item local storage dot get item local storage dot dot get item is whatever variable you might have stored, right? Maybe something like token is some value you might have, some variable you might have. And when you get the value, you just maybe because you have to parse it, so I'll just write here parse. So when you're returning here, whatever value the token has, that will be returned, and that value will be assigned to this particular value. Okay, and if it is not there, else maybe you are setting up null, or maybe some default value like return 0. 0 will be the value that will be stored. So if this some conditional approach is there, in that case you have to use a function callback kind of a structure to assign the initial value to the value. Okay, this is the direct value, this is the initial value. And there is one more way in which you can set initial value. And these are all questions, right? 3 questions we've discussed. The 4th question related to use state someone can ask is something like this. If I want to set, if I'm having a form, okay, and I'm having a set form kind of a functionality where I want to set the initial value of a form. So in that case, you can, because form we are having number of fields, right? So you can set a kind of an property value kind of structure. So name, okay, name, age, password, username, all these things, right? Like this you want to set. So you can use in the form of kind of a object here. Maybe you can use so names or so address. So address can be a function like this, right? It can be a function which will return something, return this dot, if there is a address or whatever, city, all these things you can kind of return. So like this also you can set the form. But the problem with this is whenever you are trying to update something, then all the properties will be updated. For example, if I want to like if I create a form and try to imagine that I'm having a handle form kind of a function here, and in this handle form I have to just update the state right here, const. In this handle form I have to update the state. So in that updating of the state of maybe updating the age or name, one of them you have to update. So you have to write something like this, set form, and you have to take the functional approach, previous value, okay, and you have to write something like this. So then you have to write take the previous value. So I'll just, because the previous value is a object, I can write here, I will just take previous value, and I will extract it first basically, and then kind of I have to set the maybe age, right? So that age I have to set as maybe different value, like this I have to write something like this, okay, something like this I have to do. I mean it's wrong, I mean it's not showing them. Maybe I have to write here parenthesis because I'm not returning anything, right? So I have to write in the parenthesis format. Okay, like this, imagine that like this you have to write. Okay, it's showing an error. Values never is okay. Anyway, so in this manner you have to update the form. The problem is if one of the value changes, you have to always manually like this. This is not a good approach because in the form you never know any. I mean, these are only two fields, but a lot of fields can be added like 10, 12, 15, 30. In that case, it is very difficult to manage. So the solution for that will be create individual use states for every level, so it is easy to maintain, okay, and it is easy to customize also. That is the ideal approach. And this will work, but it shouldn't be the ideal approach. So four type of questions that can be asked. One is why the UseState is used. So you can use the counter application. I mean counter way of how I showed the example, that example. And if how to update immediately. Will it update immediately? No, it won't update immediately because it's an asynchronous manner of updation of the values. And if I want to update, how to do, you have to do in this manner. If I do increment or decrement multiple times, what should happen? So this is the way, without using a callback. If I want to do it, how it should work. So that is the question that I've said earlier. If I want to insert the value conditional manner, then you have to use a kind of a callback approach, right? And if I want to use a form kind of thing where multiple properties values are there, then how I can update is this manner, okay? So 5 6 different questions can be formed by using a use state. I hope you understood it, and yeah, you practice this, and I think this will help you a lot in your interview, because I've covered everything related to use state, okay? If you like this video, and let's go to the next video.